St. Louis is an independent city and inland port in the U.S. state of Missouri. The city developed along the western bank of the Mississippi River, which forms Missouri's border with Illinois. In 2010, St. Louis had a population of 319,294. A 2015 estimate put the population at 315,685, making it the 60th most populous U.S. city and the second largest city in Missouri after Kansas City. The St. Louis metropolitan area includes the city as well as nearby areas in Missouri and Illinois, with an estimated population of 2,916,447. It is the largest in Missouri and the 19th largest in the United States. St. Louis was founded in 1764 by fur traders Pierre Leclerc and Auguste Chautou, and named after Louis IX of France. Claimed first by the French, who settled mostly east of the Mississippi River. The region in which the city stands was ceded to Spain following France's defeat in the 7 Years' War. Its territory east of the Mississippi was ceded to the Kingdom of Great Britain, the victor. The area of present-day Missouri was part of Spanish Louisiana from 1762 until 1803. The French persuaded King Charles IV of Spain to cede Louisiana back to France in 1800, but the Spanish continued as administrators of the territory until the Louisiana Purchase in 1803. After the United States acquired this territory in the Louisiana Purchase, St. Louis developed as a major port on the Mississippi River. In the late 19th century, St. Louis was ranked as the fourth largest city in the United States. It separated from St. Louis County in 1877, becoming an independent city and limiting its own political boundaries. In 1904, it hosted the Louisiana Purchase Exposition and the Summer Olympics. Immigration has increased, and the city is the center of the largest Bosnian population in the world outside the homeland. The economy of St. Louis relies on service, manufacturing, trade, transportation of goods, and tourism. The city is home to several major corporations, including Anheuser-Busch, Express Scripts, Peabody Energy, Amerin, Ralcorp, Monsanto, and Sigma Aldrich, as well as a large medical and research community. St. Louis has two professional sports teams, the St. Louis Cardinals of Major League Baseball and the St. Louis Blues of the National Hockey League. The city is commonly identified with the 630-foot-tall Gateway Arch in downtown St. Louis. History. The area that would become St. Louis was a center of the Native American Mississippian culture, which built numerous temple and residential earthwork mounds on both sides of the Mississippi River. The major regional center was at Cahokia Mounds, active from 900 AD to 1500 AD. Due to numerous major earthworks within St. Louis' boundaries, the city was nicknamed as the Mound City. These mounds were mostly demolished during the city's development. Historic Native American tribes in the area included the Siouan-speaking Osage people, whose territory extended west, and the Illiniwek. European exploration of the area was first recorded in 1673, when French explorers Louis Joliet and Jacques Marquette traveled through the Mississippi River Valley. 5 years later, La Salle claimed the region for France as part of La Louisiane. The earliest European settlements in the area were built in Illinois country on the east side of the Mississippi River during the 1690s and early 1700s at Cahokia, Kaskaskia, and Fort de Chartres. Migrants from the French villages on the opposite side of the Mississippi River founded Saint Genevieve in the 1730s. In 1721, after leaving Quebec, French traveller Pierre-François-Xavier de Charlevoix reached the area, calling it the finest confluence in the world. In early 1764, after France lost the 7 Years' War, Pierre Leclerc and his stepson Auguste Chouteau founded what was to become the city of St. Louis. The early French families built the city's economy on the fur trade with the Osage, as well as with more distant tribes along the Missouri River. The Chouteau brothers gained a monopoly from Spain on the fur trade with Santa Fe. French colonists used African slaves as domestic servants and workers in the city. From 1762 to 1803, European control of the area west of the Mississippi to the northernmost part of the Missouri River Basin, called Louisiana, was assumed by the Spanish as part of the Viceroyalty of New Spain. In 1780, during the American Revolutionary War, St. Louis was attacked by British forces, mostly Native American allies, in the Battle of St. Louis. Founding and before 19th century, the founding of St. Louis began in 1763. Pierre Leclerc led an expedition to set up a fur trading post farther up the Mississippi River. Before then, Leclerc had been a very successful merchant. For this reason, he and his trading partner Gilbert Antoine de Street Maxon were offered monopolies for 6 years of the fur trading in that area. Though they were originally only granted rights to set up a trading post, Leclerc and other members of his expedition quickly set up a settlement. Some historians believe that Leclerc's determination to create this settlement was the result of his affair with a married woman, Marie Thérèse Bourgeois Chouteau, and so they wanted to get out of New Orleans. Leclerc on his initial expedition was accompanied by his young stepson Auguste Chouteau. Some historians still debate which of the two men was the true founder of St. Louis. The reason for this lingering question is that all the documentation of the founding was loaned, and subsequently destroyed in a fire. For the first few years of St. Louis' existence, the city was not recognized by any of the governments. Though originally thought to be under the control of the Spanish government, no one asserted any authority over the settlement, and thus St. Louis had no local government. This led Leclerc to assume a position of civil control, and all problems were disposed in public settings, such as communal meetings. In addition, Leclerc granted new settlers lots in town and the country, to give something to the new settlers to start off with. In hindsight, many of these original settlers thought of these first few years as the golden age of St. Louis. However, by 1765, the city began receiving notifications and visits from representatives and military actives from members of the English, French, and Spanish governments. In addition, the Indians in the local area expressed dissatisfaction to being under the command and control of British forces. One of the great Ottawa chieftain, Pontiac, was angered by the change of power and potential for the British to come into the lands. He desired to fight against them with power and force, but many of the St. Louis inhabitants refused. Around this time, a man named St. Orange came and helped make St. Louis more of a successful city, helping deal with all the diplomatic issues from the various nationalities of the British, French, and Spanish governments, along with the local Indians. 19th century, St. Louis was transferred to the French First Republic in 1800, then sold by the French to the U.S. in 1803 as part of the Louisiana Purchase. St. Louis became the capital of and gateway to the new territory. Shortly after the official transfer of authority was made, the Lewis and Clark expedition was commissioned by President Thomas Jefferson. The expedition departed from St. Louis in May 1804 along the Missouri River to explore the vast territory. There were hopes of finding a water route to the Pacific Ocean, but the party had to go overland in the Upper West. They reached the Pacific Ocean via the Columbia River in summer 1805. They returned, reaching St. Louis on September 23, 1806. Both Lewis and Clark lived in St. Louis after the expedition. Many other explorers, settlers, and trappers would later take a similar route to the west. The city elected its first municipal legislators in 1808. Steamboats first arrived in St. Louis in 1818, improving connections with New Orleans and eastern markets. Missouri was admitted as a state in 1821. As the state gained settlers, the first capital of Missouri was St. Louis before eventually moving to the more central location of Jefferson City in 1826. St. Louis was incorporated as a city in 1822, and continued to develop largely due to its busy port and trade connections. Slaves worked in many jobs on the waterfront as well as on the riverboats. Given the city's location close to the free state of Illinois and others, some slaves escaped to freedom. Others, especially women with children, sued in court in freedom suits, and several prominent local attorneys aided slaves in these suits. About half the slaves achieved freedom in hundreds of suits before the American Civil War. Immigrants from Ireland and Germany arrived in St. Louis in significant numbers starting in the 1840s, and the population of St. Louis grew from less than 20,000 in 1840 to 77,860 in 1850 to more than 160,000 by 1860. By the mid-1800s, St. Louis had a greater population than New Orleans. Settled by many Southerners in a slave state, the city was split in political sympathies and became polarized during the American Civil War. In 1861, 28 civilians were killed in a clash with Union troops. The war hurt St. Louis economically, due to the Union blockade of river traffic to the south on the Mississippi River. The St. Louis arsenal constructed ironclads for the Union Navy. After the war, St. Louis profited via trade with the West, aided by the 1874 completion of the Eads Bridge, named for its architect. Industrial developments on both banks of the river were linked by the bridge, the first in the Midwest over the Mississippi River. The bridge connects St. Louis, Missouri to East St. Louis, Illinois. The Eads Bridge became an iconic image of the city of St. Louis from the time of its erection until 1965, when the Gateway Arch Bridge was constructed. The bridge crosses the St. Louis River front between Laclede's Landing, to the north, and the grounds of the Gateway Arch to the south. Today the road deck has been restored, allowing vehicular and pedestrian traffic to cross the river. The St. Louis Metrolink light rail system has used the rail deck since 1993. An estimated 8,500 vehicles pass through it daily. On August 22, 1876, the city of St. Louis voted to secede from St. Louis County and become an independent city. Industrial production continued to increase during the late 19th century. Major corporations such as the Anheuser-Busch and Ralston Purina Company were established. St. Louis also was home to Desloge Consolidated Lead Company and several brass-era automobile companies, including the Success Automobile Manufacturing Company. St. Louis is the site of the Wainwright Building, an early skyscraper built in 1892 by noted architect Louis Sullivan. 20th century. In 1904, the city hosted the 1904 World's Fair and the 1904 Summer Olympics, becoming the first non-European city to host the Olympics. Permanent facilities and structures remaining from the fair are Forest Park and associated structures within its boundaries, the St. Louis Art Museum, the St. Louis Zoo and the Missouri History Museum. In the aftermath of emancipation of slaves following the Civil War, social and racial discrimination in housing and employment were common in St. Louis. Starting in the 1910s, many property deeds included racial or religious restrictive covenants against new immigrants and migrants. In the first half of the 20th century, St. Louis was a destination for many African Americans in the Great Migration from the rural South seeking better opportunities. During World War II, the NAACP campaigned to integrate war factories, and restrictive covenants were prohibited in 1948 by the Shelley v. Creamer U.S. Supreme Court decision, which case originated as a lawsuit in St. Louis. In 1964, civil rights activists protested at the construction of the Gateway Arch to publicize their effort to gain entry for African Americans into the skilled trade unions, where they were underrepresented. The Department of Justice filed the first suit against the unions under the Civil Rights Act of 1964. De jure educational segregation continued into the 1950s, and de facto segregation continued into the 1970s, leading to a court challenge in inter-district desegregation agreement. Students have been bused mostly from the city to county school districts to have opportunities for integrated classes, although the city has created magnet schools to attract students. St. Louis, like many Midwestern cities, expanded in the early 20th century due to industrialization, which provided jobs to new generations of immigrants and migrants from the South. It reached its peak population of 856,796 at the 1950 census. Suburbanization from the 1950s through the 1990s dramatically reduced the city's population, as did restructuring of industry and loss of jobs. The effects of suburbanization were exacerbated by the relatively small geographical size of St. Louis due to its earlier decision to become an independent city, and it lost much of its tax base. During the 19th and 20th century, most major cities aggressively annexed surrounding areas as residential development occurred away from the central city. However, St. Louis was unable to do so. In the 21st century, the city of St. Louis contains only 11% of its total metropolitan population, while among the top 20 metro areas in the United States, the central cities contain an average of 24% of total metropolitan area population. Although small increases in population have taken place in St. Louis during the early 2000s, overall the city lost population from 2000 to 2010. Immigration has continued, with the city attracting Vietnamese, Latinos from Mexico and Central America, and Bosnians, the latter forming the largest Bosnian community outside of Bosnia. Several urban renewal projects were built in the 1950s, as the city worked to replace old and substandard housing. Some of these were poorly designed and resulted in problems, of which Pruitt-Igoe became a symbol of failure. It was torn down. Since the 1980s, several revitalization efforts have focused on downtown St. Louis. 21st century urban revitalization continued in the new century. Gentrification has taken place in the Washington Avenue Historic District. In 2006, St. Louis received the World Leadership Award for Urban Renewal. In 2013, the U.S. Census Bureau estimated that St. Louis had a population of 318,416. In 2014, St. Louis celebrated its 250th birthday with events throughout the year. These were coordinated by the Missouri History Museum through its non-profit entity, STL 250, with help from the St. Louis Ambassadors Volunteer Organization and its U.S. Small Business Institute. Commemorations of the ARC's 50th birthday took place in 2015. Geography. Topography. According to the United States Census Bureau, St. Louis has a total area of 66 square miles, of which 62 square miles is land and 4.1 square miles is water. The city is built primarily on bluffs and terraces that rise 100 to 200 feet above the western banks of the Mississippi River, in the midwestern United States just south of the Missouri-Mississippi confluence. Much of the area is a fertile and gently rolling prairie that features low hills and broad, shallow valleys. Both the Mississippi River and the Missouri River have cut large valleys with wide floodplains. Limestone and dolomite of the Mississippian epoch underlie the area, and parts of the city are karst in nature. This is particularly true of the area south of downtown, which has numerous sinkholes and caves. Most of the caves in the city have been sealed, but many springs are visible along the river front. Coal, brickclay, and millite ore were once mined in the city. The predominant surface rock, known as St. Louis limestone, is used as dimension stone and rubble for construction. Near the southern boundary of the city of St. Louis is the River des Peres, practically the only river or stream within the city limits that is not entirely underground. Most of River des Peres was confined to a channel or put underground in the 1920s and early 1930s. The lower section of the river was the site of some of the worst flooding of the Great Flood of 1993. The city's eastern boundary is the Mississippi River, which separates Missouri from Illinois. The Missouri River forms the northern line of St. Louis County, except for a few areas where the river has changed its course. The Merrimack River forms most of its southern line. Cityscape neighborhoods. The city is divided into 79 government-designated neighborhoods. The neighborhood divisions have no legal standing, although some neighborhood associations administer grants or hold veto power over historic district development. Climate. St. Louis lies in the transitional zone between the humid continental climate type and the humid subtropical climate type, with neither large mountains nor large bodies of water to moderate its temperature. The city experiences hot, humid summers and cold winters. It is subject to both cold Arctic air and hot, humid tropical air from the Gulf of Mexico. The average annual temperature recorded at nearby Lambert St. Louis International Airport is 57.1 degrees Fahrenheit. Both 100 and 0 degrees Fahrenheit temperatures can be seen on an average 2 or 3 days per year. Average annual precipitation is about 41.0 inches, but annual precipitation has ranged from 20.59 in 1953 to 61.24 in 2015. The city has 4 distinct seasons. Spring is typically the wettest season, with 11.7 in of precipitation, although dry spells lasting 1 to 2 weeks are possible during the growing seasons. Spring produces severe weather ranging from tornadoes to winter storms. St. Louis has thunderstorms 48 days a year on average, especially in the spring. These storms can often be severe, with high winds, large hail and tornadoes. Lying near the hotbed of the Tornado Alley, St. Louis is one of the metropolitan areas with most frequent tornadoes. The area has an extensive history of damaging tornadoes, but they seldom touch down in the city. The average date of the last freeze is April 3. Summers are hot and humid. Temperatures of 90 degrees Fahrenheit or higher occur 43 days a year. The daily average temperature in July is 80.0 degrees Fahrenheit. The record high temperature is 115 degrees Fahrenheit on July 14, 1954. July 2012 was the hottest month in the 138-year recorded weather temperatures in St. Louis history, starting in 1874, with an average daily temperature of 88.1 degrees Fahrenheit. The 25th of that month also tied the all-time record warm daily minimum of 86 degrees Fahrenheit, first set July 24, 1901. Fall is mild and sunny, with lower humidity. There can be periods of heavy rainfall, with the first measurable snow usually falling around December 4. Peak fall foliage occurs in mid to late October, with the average date of the first freeze falling on November 1. Some late autumns feature a period of warm weather known as Indian summer. In some years roses still bloom as late as early December. Winters can range from chilly to cold, as high temperatures below freezing occur 25 days per year on average. Each winter regularly has at least one major snowstorm accumulating 4 inches or more, though snow on the ground rarely lasts for more than a few days at a time. The season can also bring comparable amounts of rain. Nonetheless, it is typically the driest season. Winter storm systems, such as Alberta Clippers and Panhandle hooks, can yield heavy freezing rain, ice pellets, and snowfall, typically followed by a few days of clear but very cold weather. The daily average temperature in January is 31.8 degrees Fahrenheit. The official record low is -22 degrees Fahrenheit on January 5, 1884, although there were unofficial readings of -23 degrees Fahrenheit on January 29, 1873. The record cold daily maximum is -5 degrees Fahrenheit on Christmas Eve 1983. The average amount of winter precipitation is 7.5 in. The average seasonal snowfall is 17.7 inches, historically ranging from 1.5 in 1953-54 to 67.6 in 1911-12. Flora and fauna. Before the founding of the city, the area was mostly prairie and open forest. Native Americans maintained this environment, good for hunting, by burning underbrush. Trees are mainly oak, maple, and hickory, similar to the forests of the nearby Ozarks. Common understory trees include eastern redbud, serviceberry, and flowering dogwood. Riparian areas are forested with mainly American sycamore. Most of the residential areas of the city are planted with large native shade trees. The largest native forest area is found in Forest Park. In autumn, the changing color of the trees is notable. Most species here are typical of the eastern woodland, although numerous decorative non-native species are found. The most notable invasive species is Japanese honeysuckle, which officials are trying to manage because of its damage to native trees. It is removed from some parks. Large mammals found in the city include urbanized coyotes and white-tailed deer. Eastern gray squirrel, cottontail rabbit, and other rodents are abundant, as well as the nocturnal Virginia opossum. Large bird species are abundant in parks and include Canada goose, mallard duck, as well as shorebirds, including the great egret and great blue heron. Gulls are common along the Mississippi River. These species typically follow barge traffic. Winter populations of bald eagles are found along the Mississippi River around the Chain of Rocks Bridge. The city is on the Mississippi Flyway, used by migrating birds, and has a large variety of small bird species, common to the eastern U.S. The Eurasian tree sparrow, an introduced species, is limited in North America to the county city's surrounding St. Louis. The city has special sites for bird watching of migratory species, including Tower Grove Park. Frogs are commonly found in the springtime, especially after extensive wet periods. Common species include the American toad and species of chorus frogs commonly called spring peepers, which are found in nearly every pond. Some years have outbreaks of cicadas or ladybugs. Mosquitoes, no-see-ums, and houseflies are common insect nuisances, especially in July and August. Because of this, windows are nearly universally fitted with screens. Invasive populations of honeybees have sharply declined in recent years. Numerous native species of pollinator insects have recovered to fill their ecological niche, and armadillos have been regularly seen throughout the St. Louis area, especially since 2005.